The assignment packet hit his desk. Denied. F-16 training terminated. Another Barbie pilot. Lieutenant Colonel Stevens muttered, not caring she could hear. Jennifer Hayes didn't flinch. 480 combat hours over Afghanistan had taught her when to fight and when to endure. Her special operations wings caught the fluorescent light worn thin. From nights most pilots never see, Stevens' pen scratched across her future. Administrative desk duty. Not fighters. Not the air-to-air combat she'd earned the right to attempt. Just paperwork. Pretty girls think flying F-16s is like Instagram stories. He continued, stamping reassigned across her dreams. Real fighter pilots understand G-forces, not selfies. She saluted crisply and left. No argument. No explanation. Her air medal and combat patch spoke a language Stevens couldn't read. Outside, F-16 Fighting Falcons sat ready for takeoff aircraft she'd never fly, because someone saw her baby face instead of her AC-130 gunship experience. If you believe real wings aren't earned through looks, type Spec Ops in the comments. This story gets deeper, but for days later, someone who understood aircraft designations would read her file completely. Captain Jennifer Hayes stood at perfect attention in the climate-controlled flight operations office at MacDill Air Force Base, Florida. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead with mechanical persistence, casting harsh shadows across Lieutenant Colonel Robert Stevens' weathered face as he processed what he considered routine paperwork. The distant thunder of F-16 engines starting their morning pre-flight checks echoed through the building's thin walls, a constant reminder of the aircraft she would never be allowed to fly. Her flight suit bore the distinctive patches that told a story Stevens chose not to read. Special Operations Command wings earned through missions he couldn't imagine. A combat flight hours patch displaying 480 hours of hostile airspace operations, and an air medal with accompanying ribbon that spoke of valor under fire. The fabric showed subtle wear patterns round the shoulder harnesses, and knee patches evidence of countless hours strapped into aircraft cockpits under conditions that tested both machine and pilot beyond normal limits. Stevens flipped through her personnel file with practiced indifference, his eyes skimming over details without comprehension. He saw what he expected to see, a young woman with delicate features and a petite frame that didn't match his mental image of what a fighter pilot should look like. Her blonde hair was regulation length but feminine, her skin unmarked by the rugged appearance he associated with combat veterans. To him, she represented everything wrong with modern military diversity initiatives. "Look, Captain Hayes," he said, leaning back in his government tissue chair with the confidence of someone who had never been challenged on his assumptions. "I'm going to save us both some time here. Flying F-16 Fighting Falcons requires people who genuinely understand air-to-air combat tactics, complex avionics systems, and split-second decision-making under extreme G-forces that would make most people black out." The air conditioning cycled on with a mechanical wheeze, circulating the sterile office air that smelled of cleaning chemicals and copy machine toner. Outside the window, heat distortion rose from the Florida tarmac where rows of F-16s sat like sleeping predators, their gray paint schemes designed for lethality rather than beauty. "These aircraft aren't toys," Stevens continued, enjoying what he perceived as an educational moment. "Their weapons systems worth $30 million each, capable of Mach 2, 0, and pulling 9 Gs in a sustained turn. The pilots who fly them need to have the physical and mental capability to handle that kind of stress while simultaneously managing threat assessment, weapons employment, and tactical communication." He stamped her reassignment order with unnecessary force, the sound echoing through the small office like a gavel of judgment. "I'd suggest you report to the Personnel Support Squadron on Monday morning. Administrative duties, data entry, personnel file management, that's work that matches your skill set." Jennifer accepted the document without protest, her expression remaining professionally neutral despite the deliberate insult. She rendered a crisp military salute, executed a precise about-face, and departed the office without offering any defense of her qualifications or explanation of her background. Her silence wasn't submission, it was the discipline of someone who had learned when words were worthless and when actions would speak louder than arguments. Outside the building, the afternoon Florida heat shimmered off the tarmac in waves that made the distant aircraft appear to dance. The smell of jet fuel and hydraulic fluid filled the humid air sense that triggered memories of different aircraft in more dangerous places, where precision meant the difference between life and death for soldiers pinned down by enemy fire far below. The walk across MacDill's flight line felt longer than any combat mission Jennifer had ever flown. F-16 Fighting Falcons lined the tarmac in perfect formation, their canopies gleaming like accusatory eyes in the afternoon sun. Each aircraft represented a dream deferred, a capability denied, a future grounded by prejudice masquerading as professional judgment. Stevens' words echoed in her mind as she passed the fighter jets that would remain forever out of reach. His casual dismissal hadn't been just about her gender, it had been about his fundamental assumption that competence came with a specific appearance, that expertise required a particular physical package he could recognize and approve. Other pilots moved around the aircraft with purposeful efficiency, conducting pre-flight inspections and reviewing mission briefs. Several glanced in her direction with expressions that ranged from curious to sympathetic, but none approached. The military's unspoken protocol of non-interference in administrative decisions created an invisible barrier around her situation that even well-meaning colleagues wouldn't cross. In the distance, she could see the flight training building where her former classmates were receiving instruction on F-16 systems and tactics, lessons she would never attend, skills she would never develop, missions she would never fly. The irony cut deeper than Stevens' insults. She possessed more actual combat flying experience than any of the students currently enrolled in the program, yet her baby face and feminine features had disqualified her before any evaluation of her capabilities. The weight of unspoken experience pressed down on her shoulders like invisible G-forces. For 180 hours of combat flight time over Afghanistan, navigating AC-130 Spectre gunships through hostile airspace while providing close air support for ground troops under fire. Missions flown in complete darkness using only infrared targeting systems and radio guidance from forward air controllers who trusted her precision with their lives. Night after night, she had piloted the massive gunship through complex attack patterns, coordinating with ground forces to deliver exactly the right amount of firepower at exactly the right moment. Too little, and friendly forces remained pinned down by enemy fire. Too much, and collateral damage would create more enemies than it eliminated. The margin for error measured in single-digit meters while flying at altitude in contested airspace. She remembered the radio calls that had defined her military service, Angel of Death. This is Groundhog 6. We need immediate support on grid 334 to 287. Danger close. Troops in contact. Those transmissions always carried the weight of desperation, the voice of someone whose survival depended entirely on her skill and judgment. The AC-130's 105mm howitzer required steady hands and precise timing. The 40mm Bofors gun demanded coordination between pilot, navigator, and fire control officer. The 25mm GA-U-1 equalizer needed split-second target identification under combat stress. Jennifer had mastered all of these systems while simultaneously flying the aircraft, managing communications, and maintaining situational awareness in an environment where enemy surface-to-air missiles were a constant threat. But Lieutenant Colonel Stevens had seen only her exterior appearance and made his decision accordingly. Her actual qualifications, documented in flight records and performance evaluations, remained irrelevant compared to his preconceived notions about what a fighter pilot should look like. As she reached her quarters, the sound of F-16 afterburners igniting for evening training flights seemed to mock her grounded status. The thunderous roar reminded her that somewhere in the Pentagon's vast bureaucracy, her service record contained details that Stevens had never bothered to examine. Details that would matter to someone with the authority and wisdom to read them completely. In the privacy of her temporary quarters, Jennifer finally allowed herself a moment of vulnerability that she would never display in public. She sat on the edge of her government tissue bed, still wearing the flight suit that bore the symbols of achievements Stevens had dismissed without examination. Her fingers traced the outline of her Special Operations Command wings, feeling the worn metal that had been polished by years of contact with flight suit fabric. These wings represented more than military decoration. They were a physical manifestation of capabilities earned through the most demanding training and proven under the most challenging conditions. The Air Force didn't award Special Operations wings casually. They required completion of specialized courses, demonstration of exceptional flying skills, and successful performance in actual combat operations. The qualification process had been brutal. Months of intensive training in low-level navigation, tactical formation flying, air refueling procedures, and weapons employment. Night flying exercises in complete darkness, precision bombing runs against targets measured in single-meter accuracy, and emergency procedures practiced until they became muscle memory. Only pilots who demonstrated exceptional skill and judgment under extreme pressure were selected for special operations assignments. The small patch displaying 480 combat flight hours represented nights that most military personnel would never experience. Each are documented in official flight records, verified by squadron commanders, and certified by Air Force personnel systems. 480 hours of flying in contested airspace where enemy fighters, surface-to-air missiles, and anti-aircraft artillery created constant threats requiring split-second decisions, with life-or-death consequences. Her air medal sat quietly among the other ribbons, its bronze star indicating valor demonstrated under fire. The citation, filed in her permanent record, described her actions during a particularly intense night mission, when enemy forces had surrounded a special forces unit requiring immediate extraction. She had piloted the AC-130 through sustained anti-aircraft fire to provide covering support, while rescue helicopters evacuated wounded soldiers from a compromised landing zone. The mission had required her to maintain precise flight patterns, while enemy tracers lit up the darkness around her aircraft. Radio communications filled with the urgent voices of ground controllers, directing her fire against enemy positions measured in meters from friendly forces. One navigation error, one moment of imprecision, and American soldiers would have died from friendly fire. Instead, her steady hands and professional judgment had enabled a successful extraction, with 0 casualties. Meanwhile, across the base in the administrative complex, Brigadier General Patricia Williams was beginning her routine review of weekly training assignments and personnel transfers. It was typically mundane work, pilots transitioning between aircraft types, administrative adjustments, the constant paperwork that kept military bureaucracy functioning. She opened her laptop and began scanning through digital files with the efficiency of someone who had processed thousands of similar documents throughout her career. Coffee cooled in her favorite mug, a gift from her former AC-130 crew, during her operational flying days while she methodically reviewed each training roster and assignment modification. General Williams had earned her position through exceptional performance as a pilot, navigator, and commander. Her office walls displayed photographs from her operational career, AC-130 crews from deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan, awards for distinguished flying, and commendations for leadership under combat conditions. She understood the difference between administrative flying and combat aviation because she had personally experienced both. Her computer screen displayed routine assignments until one specific line made her pause. Hayes, Jennifer, reassigned from F-16 training program, previous aircraft, AC-130H Spectre. She stopped scrolling and read the entry again, more carefully this time. AC-130H Spectre gunships were flown exclusively by Special Operations Command aircrew. Assignment to that aircraft type required extensive evaluation, specialized training, and demonstrated exceptional flying ability. Pilots didn't accidentally end up flying AC-130s, they were hand-selected for the mission. General Williams set down her coffee mug and leaned forward, focusing completely on Jennifer's personnel file. With practiced efficiency, she navigated through the military's personnel database to access the complete service record that Lieutenant Colonel Stevens had apparently never examined. What appeared on her screen made her lean back in her chair with genuine amazement. Captain Jennifer Hayes had accumulated 480 combat flight hours as an AC-130H Spectre pilot with the 16th Special Operations Squadron. Her assignment history showed 3 deployments to Afghanistan, to Iraq, and classified operations in locations that appeared only as coded designations in her official record. The Air Force didn't assign inexperienced pilots to fly AC-130 gunships, they selected only those who had demonstrated exceptional skill, judgment, and performance under the most demanding conditions. Her flight evaluations read like a textbook example of superior airmanship, exceptional aircraft control under combat stress, demonstrated outstanding judgment during high-threat missions, consistently accurate weapons employment in danger-close situations. The formal language of military evaluations barely contained the reality of what those words actually meant in terms of life and death decision-making. The decoration section of her record told an even more compelling story. Air Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters, indicating multiple awards for heroic achievement during aerial flight. Joint Service Commendation Medal for exceptional performance during combat operations. Combat Action Medal certifying her direct participation in ground combat through close air support missions. Each decoration represented situations where her skill and courage had directly saved American lives. General Williams clicked through mission summaries that painted a picture of a pilot who had repeatedly performed under the most challenging circumstances imaginable. Night missions flown in zero visibility conditions using only infrared targeting systems. Close air support provided to Special Forces units surrounded by enemy forces. Emergency medical evacuations conducted under direct fire from hostile positions. One mission report particularly caught her attention during a complex extraction operation. Captain Hayes had maintained precise fire support for over 4 hours, while enemy forces attempted to overrun a surrounded reconnaissance team. Her accurate weapons employment had eliminated multiple enemy positions, while maintaining sufficient precision to avoid friendly fire casualties. Despite danger, close distance is measured in single-digit meters. The technical aspects of her flying background were equally impressive. AC-130 gunships required pilots to master 3 different weapons systems simultaneously, while flying complex orbital patterns around ground targets. The 105mm howitzer demanded precise aircraft positioning for accurate fire. The 40mm Bofors gun required coordination between pilot inputs and gunner targeting. The 25mm GAU-12 equalizer needed split-second timing for effective employment against moving targets. Managing all these systems while flying in contested airspace, coordinating with ground forces, monitoring tactical communications, and maintaining situational awareness of air defense threats required a level of multitasking and decision-making that exceeded the demands of most military aviation roles. Yet Lieutenant Colonel Stevens had dismissed her capabilities, based solely on her physical appearance. General Williams reached for her secure telephone, already formulating how to address this significant oversight in the personnel system. Captain Hayes possessed qualifications that exceeded those of most pilots currently serving in the F-16 program. Yet she had been summarily dismissed by an officer who apparently hadn't bothered to read her actual service record. "Major Rodriguez," she said when her aide answered, "I need you to locate Captain Jennifer Hayes immediately and arrange for her to report to my office at her earliest convenience. Also, please retrieve the complete file on Lieutenant Colonel Stevens' recent training assignment to Sisio." She hung up the phone and returned to Jennifer's service record, noting additional details that painted the picture of an exceptional aviator. whose capabilities had been severely underestimated. The AC-130 community represented the most demanding flying in the Air Force Special Operations Command. Pilots who succeeded in that environment possessed exactly the skills and judgment required for fighter aircraft operations. If anything, they were overqualified for F-16 training. The irony was profound. Jennifer Hayes had been denied training on single-seat fighters, despite having successfully piloted multi-crew gunships through some of the most dangerous missions in modern warfare. Her combat experience, documented flying ability, and proven performance under stress should have made her an ideal candidate for any advanced aviation program. But stereotypes and assumptions had prevented proper evaluation of her qualifications, nearly resulting in the loss of exceptional talent to administrative paperwork. General Williams made a mental note to review Lieutenant Colonel Stevens' decision-making process and ensure that such oversights didn't occur again. 20 minutes later, Jennifer stood at attention in General Williams' spacious office, uncertain why she had been summoned by the base's senior commander. The office walls displayed photographs spanning decades of Air Force Special Operations history, including several images of AC-130 crews that immediately caught her attention. Behind the general's desk, a model AC-130H Spectre sat prominently displayed, a clear indication of personal experience with the aircraft type. "Captain Hayes," General Williams began, gesturing toward a comfortable chair while remaining standing herself in a gesture of respect. "I've just completed a thorough review of your service record and flying background." Jennifer offered a precise nod, maintaining her professional composure despite growing curiosity about the purpose of this meeting. "Yes, ma'am. I need to understand why you didn't provide any clarification or additional information when Lieutenant Colonel Stevens reassigned you from F-16 training to administrative duties." "I wasn't specifically asked for clarification, ma'am. The processing officer made his decision based on whatever information he chose to review." General Williams studied her carefully, recognizing the calm professionalism that characterized pilots who had operated under significantly more challenging circumstances than office politics. "According to your documentation, you've accumulated substantial combat flight hours with the 16th Special Operations Squadron. Were those actual combat missions or training exercises?" "Operational missions, ma'am. Real-world deployments with active engagement parameters." "Then help me understand why someone with your documented experience and qualifications was enrolled in basic F-16 transition training." "You've already flown more complex missions than most of my current fighter pilots will see in their entire careers." Jennifer considered her response carefully before speaking. "Because this wasn't about proving that I could fly F-16s, ma'am. It was about proving that I still wanted to fly them." General Williams nodded slowly, recognizing the deeper meaning behind her words. Combat veterans often struggled with transition from the intensity of operational flying to routine peacetime aviation. The challenge wasn't capability, it was maintaining motivation for less demanding missions after experiencing the ultimate test of flying skills. "The officer who redirected your assignment packet made his decision based on incomplete information and personal assumptions. That's not uncommon, but it's also not acceptable." She moved closer to her desk, pulling out a fresh assignment document that had already been prepared through proper channels. "You're not reporting to administrative duties, Captain Hayes. You'll be reporting to the 56th Fighter Wing's F-16 Training Squadron, effective immediately. All necessary paperwork has been processed and approved." Jennifer looked up with the first sign of genuine surprise she had shown during the conversation. "Understood, ma'am. Before you leave, is there anything else I should know about your background or preferences that might affect your training assignment?" Jennifer's expression remained neutral, but there was a subtle shift in her posture that suggested she was accessing memories from her special operations service. "Only that I tend to perform most effectively during night flying operations, ma'am." General Williams allowed herself a thin smile of appreciation, recognizing the understated reference to her AC-130 background. I would expect nothing less from someone who served with the 16th Special Operations Squadron. As Jennifer prepared to leave, General Williams made one final observation. "For what it's worth, Captain, I've reviewed the flight records of every pilot currently assigned to this base. Your combat experience and flying qualifications exceed those of officers, who outrank you by multiple grades." Lieutenant Colonel Stevens made a significant error in judgment. Permission to speak freely. "Ma'am, granted." His error provided me with valuable information about the importance of ensuring that decision-makers have access to complete and accurate information before making personnel determinations that affect operational readiness. General Williams recognized the diplomatic way she had just described institutional prejudice. Without filing a formal complaint, dismissed Captain Hayes, "Welcome to the F-16 program." Within hours of her reassignment, word spread through MacDill's aviation community about the AC-130 pilot, who had been initially dismissed from fighter training. Pilots who had questioned her qualifications began requesting opportunities to discuss combat flying with someone whose experience level exceeded their own. Flight instructors discovered that her intuitive understanding of complex aviation systems came from extensive real-world operational experience under conditions they had only read about in training manuals. Lieutenant Colonel Stevens received a formal administrative review, nothing dramatic or career-ending, just a quiet reassessment of his decision-making process and evaluation protocols when reviewing pay, personnel qualifications. The review emphasized the importance of thoroughly examining service records before making training assignments, particularly for personnel with specialized backgrounds. Jennifer never discussed her AC-130 missions or mentioned her Special Operations Service record, but military personnel who had served with Special Operations Command recognized her immediately through subtle indicators that civilians would never notice. The way she approached aircraft with tactical awareness, the unconscious habit of scanning for defensive positions, the calm competence that comes only from operating in environments where mistakes have lethal consequences. A handwritten note appeared on the squadron bulletin board one morning, unsigned but clearly from someone with insight into her actual background. "Don't ask where she came from, just try to keep up with where she's going. Learning experiences are valuable for everyone, ma'am, even when they're uncomfortable." As Jennifer walked toward the maintenance hangar to complete her post-flight documentation, General Williams reflected on how close the Air Force had come to losing an exceptional pilot to administrative prejudice and institutional assumptions. Sometimes the most qualified people are also the quietest about their qualifications, preferring to let their performance speak rather than their personnel files. For more stories where silence earns respect before words do, and where true professionals let their work demonstrate their worth, remember that real wings aren't earned through appearance, they're earned through courage, skill, and the quiet dignity of those who serve when others sleep safely. Thank you for typing Spec Ops. Subscribe for more stories where silent wings speak loudest. Support our mission through Buy Me a Coffee, link in the first pinned comment. Until next time, cleared for takeoff.